Good evening, everyone. Welcome to AZeotropy. We are here at ChemVision and we are conducting a session on oil and gas. The impact of the oil and gas industry and its content related to chemical engineering. We have Professor Sanjay Mahajani with us, who is an esteemed professor at the Department of Chemical Engineering in IIT Bombay, and Mr. Neeraj, who shall be introduced by Professor himself. So, over to you, Professor. Sir, you are muted.
Yeah, thank you, Kriti, and good evening to everyone. Mm, so we are here to hear Mr. Sethi about oil and gas sector, and I'm quite sure all of you have some background in your undergraduate program, postgraduate program, and whatever learning you had in your engineering classes, right, about oil and gas sector. But this session is going to be quite interesting because we have somebody who has spent almost 25 years in this field. Okay, and I have pleasure in introducing him, Mr. Neeraj Sethi. He is the current country leader at Baker Hughes, an energy technology company that provides solution for energy and industrial customers worldwide. Prior to this, he was the CEO of Ceylon Exploration Technology Limited, a company engaged in oil exploration and production. Mr. Neeraj has extensive international experience in general management, B&L, technology, and business development in the upstream oil and gas industry. Mr. Neeraj is also an alumnus of our department at IIT Bombay, and he obtained his BTech in chemical engineering in 1994. Okay, so now with this background, I'm sure what you must have expected for the next 45 minutes or so. The way we are going to arrange this talk is like we have Mr. Neeraj giving overview for about 20-25 minutes, and then followed by question and answers. So we have enough time for question and answers from you. I think we have a chat box here. You can put your questions in chat box. The coordinators will somehow make sure that the questions are reached Mr. Sethi, so that you get a response in time. Okay. At the same time, I would expect that you can probably unmute yourself, raise your hand, and ask your questions, but of course, one at a time. Okay. So coming back to the topic, oil and gas sector, it's again, I'll like just give you a background in couple of lines. We know that it is a very, very important sector. Somehow it is called an oil age that we are going through. It has made a large impact on the industrial growth in the last century, and somehow it's very important field to be in. And chemical engineers especially are very strongly linked with this sector. Okay, and so we have many questions like, where is this oil coming from, gas coming from, where are these reserves? Okay, which are the countries, which are the companies, what are the careers prospects in this particular field? Okay, what is the past, what is the present, and what is the future? Okay, so I'm sure we are going to get answers to all these questions from the speaker today. So with this, I would like to hand it over to Mr. Neeraj. Neeraj, can you enlighten us based on some of the questions that we have already got from students? I think we have passed them on to you. At the same time, you can add your perspective in it for the next 20-25 minutes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mahajani. Thank you, Kriti. Ladies and gentlemen, respected faculty of IIT Mumbai, the students and the attendees of this conference. It's a great pleasure. It's always an emotional bond with your alumni, and it's always a pleasure to come and talk to. Can you hear me? I just wanted to check if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, Neeraj. Yes.
It's always a great pleasure to come back to the campus and meet my old professors. I had the pleasure of celebrating my silver jubilee at the college last year, and it was a real pleasure to meet Professor Mukhopadhyay, who was my BTech project guide 25 years ago, as well as Professor Bellare and Professor Thakkar, who had taught me when I was I was a student here. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really nice to be addressing the class from this side of the panel. It seems like just yesterday I was sitting on the other side and listening to someone like me, thinking about what I'm going to do with my future, right? So, thank you for the introduction, Professor Marjani. I just want to talk a little bit about what I'm doing now and what my company does. A better part, as you already said, a better part of my life has been spent in the energy industry. I've spent a lot of time internationally working in the field, working in operations, sales, and a variety of roles. And currently I head Baker Hughes, which is an energy technology company. And we have a fairly diverse portfolio of services that we provide to our customers to enable them to bring energy from complex environments to where it is needed in an affordable and a clean way. We serve the oil and gas upstream as well as the downstream industry. And we have a very strong digital portfolio for asset monitoring and asset health, which is part of our Bentley Nevada systems. And we also have a tie-up now with Microsoft to bring artificial intelligence solutions to the industry. We also have acquired the General Electric turbo machinery division, which allows us to participate in a select club of gas turbines, supplying gas turbines, rotary compressors, and reciprocating equipment to the fertilizer, the refining, and the chemical and the power sector. Energy and technology is core to our DNA, and it's probably become core to my DNA, having spent so much time here. As a company, we spend approximately $500 million in research and development every year, and we work in 120 countries, and we file about 2,500 innovation patents every year. Now, this is not just out of self-interest, but it is about staying competitive in a landscape and staying ahead of the competition and being in that league of top few companies in our peer group, and that is expected from our customers. So this evening, I want to talk a little bit about energy. I want to give you a perspective about technology, and I want to give you a perspective about the energy transition, which is happening all around us, and it's something that we can't ignore, and it's something that we will offer more challenges and opportunities as we move forward. So let me start with energy. We all know the importance of energy in our daily lives, right? We switch on a switch and the light turns on. We turn on a tap and the water flows, right? But we live in a world where the majority of the population falls into what is known as a low-income, energy-deprived group. And what you see here is a very simple graph of GDP per head for different countries versus the annual electricity consumption per head in kilowatt hours. And you'll find that there is a direct correlation with the amount of energy consumption and the GDP per head. Now, there are no second guesses. I think you can easily see where India and where China lie. And some of you may think, oh, well, as we become more prosperous, we start using more energy. But a lot of economists will tell you otherwise. There is a direct causal relationship between access to affordable energy and prosperity, which means that access to energy helps us to make the population more productive, gives them the time to skill themselves, to upgrade their capabilities, and join the mainstream workforce. As an example, if you go 100 kilometers out of Bombay, you still find people foraging for twigs, branches, leaves, and bamboo to light fires in their home because they don't have access to electricity. That is changing. But that change has to be accelerated and will continue to accelerate as our aspirations grow and as we try to lift this population out of poverty. So that, I think, is very important, for our population. Now you can see where India is and where China is, and I think we have to move in that direction. And getting energy to that vast majority of the population is an imperative, which without which it's a necessary ingredient, without which, frankly, development will not be feasible. Okay, just a second. Right. So the second thing I wanted to touch about is the energy basket itself. When we talk about oil and gas and we talk about participating in this industry, it might be helpful to note where we are coming from and where we are going. Right. Just a second, please. Right. Okay. So as you can see, in the 19th century, biomass was the dominant form of energy for most people, right? Followed by coal in the early 20th century, and then with the discovery of oil and gas and the advent of the automobile and the internal combustion engine, there was an explosive growth in the ability to utilize hydrocarbons, and of course, arguably, engineer the development and the growth that we see in the last century. Now, at the same time, we will also notice that the amount of coal that we consume in the world has also gone up. As a result, we have a complex energy basket. It is not dependent on a single source of energy. And yes, you will hear a lot about wind, hydropower, nuclear, biofuels, and other renewables and solar. But as you can see, as of now, these constitute a fairly minuscule percentage of the overall energy basket. Now, all of this is set to change, I acknowledge, and we'll talk a little bit about what the future holds. Now, let's look at what the projection for energy holds for this world as we move forward into the next 20 to 30 years. One thing you will notice is that India will contribute to the growth of the energy demand probably more than any other country. A lot of the developed countries will probably have a slight fall in the energy demand because of shrinking populations and also a diversification of primary energy sources, as well as rationalization of their energy utilization. But India will require this growth in the energy in order to meet its growth aspirations. The second important aspect of the energy is that fossil fuels will continue to be an important source of energy. We will not be able to do away with fossil fuels. Sorry, just a second. Anytime soon. Sorry. We will not be able to wean ourselves away from fossil fuels anytime soon because the alternate sources of energy have just not caught up with the demand. The other thing that you will notice is although the share of gas, oil, and coal is coming down in the overall energy basket, in absolute terms, we still expect a significant growth in the utilization of oil and gas and coal for the foreseeable future. This presents several challenges, but it also presents us several opportunities. And as I will illustrate in the next couple of slides, it also offers some great opportunities during the transition for people graduating out of chemical engineering. Now, a small slide I wanted to illustrate is that oil and gas is a resource that not everybody is blessed with equally. And it has a huge impact on the geopolitics of the world. Just a second. Can you still hear me? Excuse me.
Yes,
Yes,
we
sir.
can hear
Hello?
you, Neeraj. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, sir. I lost me. Now, as you can see, the Middle East has a disproportionate amount of resources in oil and gas, and it's, of course, the largest exporter of oil and gas, to the extent that 90% of their economies are dependent on the export and the prices of oil and gas. Russia is another one which is blessed with this resource. And the US has actually turned around and been able to use technology to extract these resources in a very efficient manner very recently. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Unfortunately for India and China, which have very large populations dependent on energy, we are highly dependent on imports. To the extent that 80% of a foreign exchange outflow is on import of oil and gas. And for the foreseeable future, unless we can become more self-reliant in producing oil and gas within the country, we will continue to be dependent on the energy imports from countries such as the Middle East, Russia, Nigeria, and certain other countries, and be connected to the complex geopolitical alliances that are there and be dependent on them. So oil is a resource that has, obviously decided the fate of nations. It has been a resource that has been cause for several wars and conflicts around the world, and it continues to play a very important role in shaping the global economy and civilization as we know it. And for the foreseeable future, we believe that this is going to continue to be the case. Now, moving on from the importance of energy to what does it take to actually produce this source of energy, which is, obviously the dominant form of energy right now. So what does it take for us to find and produce hydrocarbons, right? So let's say you're an oil company, right? You want to produce oil. You go to a country, say a country like Nigeria or Angola, and you'll talk to the government. You'll participate in certain contractual rounds. You will bid on certain acreages spanning from anywhere from a few square kilometers to 1,000 square kilometers. You will sign a contract with the government saying that you will commit capital investment in that country, and you will try to discover oil and gas. So that's basically the process of signing a lease. The next step in oil and gas would be to start doing geophysical prospecting. So you would need to do some kind of a long, wide range ultrasound, so to speak, to map the surface of the earth by reflective acoustic imaging. And this is a field which is called geophysics. You would then process that data with high performance computing and advanced mathematical modeling, and you would create three-dimensional structures. From those structures, you will then generate a sedimentology or a geological model. And you will try to identify where over the past several million years, the sediments flowed and where they would have got deposited. So that is geological modeling. Based on that, you will generate prospects. Once those prospects are generated, you will go and drill a well. And hopefully, if you're lucky, you will find oil. And then after finding that oil, you'll start producing that oil. Now, it takes a very wide range of disciplines to come together as a team to make this happen. It doesn't just happen. You can't just have, there's no such thing as an oil engineer. It takes a fairly complex interplay of experts specializing in their fields and, working towards getting this done. So some of the key disciplines that I've mentioned that would be involved in the stages that I've shown you so far are geophysics, rock physics, mathematical modeling, high performance computing, because generating these maps and processing petabytes of data and then finding the correlations and the imaging does take a lot of mathematical modeling and high performance computing. In fact, a lot of the companies like Google, IBM, Microsoft have actually jumped into this field right now, and there are several alliances with service companies like us to be able to process this data and get better insights. In fact, now people have started using digital technologies and artificial intelligence to do things a little better and faster than what possibly humans used to do. And then that leads to a branch of engineering, which is actually known as petroleum engineering. Now, several institutes around the world, including India, have a separate petroleum engineering department. A lot of times, the petroleum engineering departments are very well allied with the chemical engineering and sometimes the mechanical engineering departments. Producing oil and gas and actually drilling for oil and gas requires you to penetrate formations which are fairly deep, which are at high temperatures, high pressures, and it actually requires a lot of material science for these materials to work under those temperatures and pressure. So, for an example, you could have a typical oil well, would have temperatures in upwards of about 250 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, well above the boiling point of water, and pressures at which submarines would the toughest submarines and submersibles would struggle to survive, right? So that's where we have to make our sensors, tools, and drilling equipment work at. So there are a lot of engineering challenges that come up when you're trying to do this, and that's why you have to stay abreast of technology and continue to find new ways of doing things better, faster, and now, of course, cleaner. Now, you might be thinking, well, where does chemical engineering fit into all of this? Now, the process of geophysical prospecting and exploration and drilling the first well and actually appraising that asset would probably take about 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. But a life of an oil field can last several decades, and maybe some of them are actually still producing after a century. Now, this is where chemical engineering really comes to the fore. Once you have discovered that oil, you actually map that oil and you create a digital model of that entire field, which is the grid that you see here. It comprises of various compartmentalized structures, and the heart of all of this is the Darcy's equation. I mean, the Darcy's equation and flow through porous media is the key to actually producing this oil out of the ground. Now, for several decades, almost a century, we've had very poor oil and gas recovery. So, a lot of that oil actually remains in the ground. So it's the chemical engineers or a petroleum engineer's job or allied disciplines that help us to extract that oil and improve that recovery. Now, there are many techniques for doing that. There is enhanced oil recovery, a lot of thermodynamics, thermal enhanced oil recovery, viscosification, surfactants, polymers, and PVT flow, PVT property modification that goes into it. It is also a field which is highly, very technical, a lot of mathematical modeling. There are a lot of simulators out there which actually help you to do that, to manage this field and to match the reality versus the digital model. And a lot of investment actually goes into that. And it's a great avenue for people with that background to actually participate in the oil industry. And a lot of leading reservoir engineers and oil field practitioners are actually former chemical engineers. Right. The other thing I want to highlight is that oil and gas is a fairly high risk, high capital business. It's not something, although there are exceptions. Okay, there are exceptions. You can have a small oil company as well, but in general, exploration is a high risk activity. By the time you get to geophysical prospecting, you would actually spend about $10 million, and depending on whether you land or offshore, you could spend on an offshore field up to $100 million acquiring data that is even required for you to generate a prospect. Once you generate a prospect, you could spend anywhere for another $10 million and to $200 million to actually drill a couple of wells. On a deep water well, typically costs $30 to $40 million, and you may have to drill 4 or 5 wells before you strike oil, which is and to properly appraise that asset. Now, after spending 10 to 100 million, maybe $200 million, until that time, you don't know whether that asset is even worth producing or not. So you could spend this money, you could find oil, and it still may not be economical to produce because you just didn't find large enough structure that could justify further investment. And then to develop that field, you probably can, spend another $100 million to $1 billion over the life cycle of that field. So it's certainly not for the faint-hearted. It requires a certain mindset to actually participate in such a risky activity. It requires deep pockets. It requires a lot of technology and skill and a lot of integration of all these technologies to be able to, successfully explore oil and gas and actually produce it economically. It requires a high risk appetite, and it requires, more than anything else, very, very strong conviction and belief and faith in your models when you're going after something. Just as an illustration, you may be aware that we have a very large field in a billion-barrel field in Rajasthan near Barmer. And for maybe 30 years, nobody believed that there was enough oil out there until a small Scottish company came in, spent $300 million on that field before they actually discovered that this was fully producible. And that actually right now produces about 25% of India's production. The other thing I wanted to touch upon is technology. I mean, we are a technology industry. And for us, technology doesn't just mean internet, digital, although that's become a very important part of our overall strategy today. Technology means many things. For example, today, when we first discovered oil, it was found at depths of 500 meters, 600 meters, that we had large reserves of oil. So you drilled one well and you could extract a lot of oil out of that well, right? But over the past 150 years, we've depleted some of the easy oil, so to speak. We have exhausted reserves of very large fields, although we're still discovering some large fields, but not at the same depths. They're deeper fields, they're more difficult to drill. We also see a lot of fields with a lot of compartmentalization, that oil is in small pockets in different parts of this geological formation. And to extract it, we have to navigate through these reservoirs in real time while having sensor data, acquiring this data almost in real time, and steering these wells towards the right sweet spot. And you can see the picture below is showing you almost like a spider web of oil wells that have been drilled over certain fields. Some of these wells are placed as far as 10 to 15 meters from each other at a depth of 3 to 4 kilometers. So you can imagine the kind of precision and the technology that it takes. The good part today is that I can be sitting here in my house, I can be accessing the internet through the browser, I can be directing these drill bits to go in different directions in real time. So it's something we call geosteering. It's almost like operating a drone from your house, but we can do several wells at the same time, operating right out of your remote base or remote access machine. So I could be drilling a well right now in Norway, 9,000 kilometers away, sitting in India, and we actually do that. So that's technology for us. It's an integration of the entire industrial, material, mechanical, sensor space, and delivering these results for our customers. The other place where we are really pushing the boundaries of engineering is the ability to do this at very high temperatures. If you can see, here is a well that has been drilled to 28,000 feet, which is about 8 kilometers below the Earth's surface. Temperatures are upwards of 400, 450 Fahrenheit and 20,000 psi. Have the properties of tin or maybe even plywood, right? So you have to have very special materials. You have to have sensor protection, because not only are we drilling a well, it's not just about taking rock out. We actually have to acquire very high quality data. They have to make informed decisions. So if you can see, here is an image that has been created out of that well, where we are seeing the fractures, the faults, and all the other paraphernalia that goes with the drilling of a well, almost in real time. We also have NMR, which is magnetic resonance. The same sensors that are used in medical technology to
image and diagnose your body are used in the oil well at some of the most extreme temperatures of the land. So we're talking about technology
Neeraj,
which is the limit of
excuse
what
me,
can be reached.
Neeraj. Sorry to interrupt you, but you are not audible properly. I think there is some issue with the
The
audio.
other challenges that our customers are now pushing us for is to actually develop deep water fields. And one example of this is the Krishna Godavari basin, where we have
Hello,
a very
Hello,
large
Neeraj.
project being conducted for ONGC, where we are providing the full suite of subsea systems,
I think
where
there is some
we
problem.
actually, at 3,000 meters of water depth, you have to be able to control the flow of this oil and actually direct it to the terminals
Hello,
and floating
Neeraj.
platforms that we have. These are fully automated systems, and they're very critical to the overall production of oil because some of you may be familiar with the Deepwater Horizon incident in the Gulf of Mexico, which cost billions of dollars of loss to the environment and to the ecosystem, and heavy losses to the companies that were operating there. Sorry, is my voice not audible?
no, sir, your voice is not audible. I think there is some issue with the audio.
Yeah, there's some
Hello?
problem. Yeah. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Can
we
hear you.
can
Can you hear
hear
me?
you. Yes, sir, it's much better now.
Did you lose me a little while ago?
Yes, sir, like the audio
Yeah,
is
yeah.
not clear.
So where did you lose me?
So you could just go back like a minute. I think that would be fine.
To the previous slide?
Yes.
Okay, okay, okay. All right.
Okay, thank you, sir.
This slide and switched over to the next slide. So that time we lost you. Like,
Okay, okay, okay. Just give me a second. All right. Hello?
yeah,
Yes,
we
sir,
can
it's
hear you
fine.
now.
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, okay. Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. Okay. All right. So we'll continue. Right. So the other technology that our customers are pushing for is the completion of deep water systems. So a lot of large reservoirs of oil are below what is known as are subsea completions, which are actually located well below where the water depths are about 1,000 meters to 3,000 meters. So even before you start drilling a well, you have to actually touch the subsea about 1,500 to 3,000 meters. So what we do is we actually bring this oil up to the seabed, and then we direct it to the various production platforms or shore-based beachheads where we actually go and process it. Now, the technology is very important because the reliability, the redundancy that is built into, and the automation that is built into it is very critical to prevent any spillage of oil in the seabed because it could have very disastrous consequences to the local ecosystem. So some of you may be aware of the Deepwater Horizon incident about 8 to 9 years ago in the Gulf of Mexico, where I mean there was billions of dollars of loss because of one well actually flowing to the seabed. So we also deliver these kind of systems, and it takes a lot of research, development, technology testing to be able to actually deliver this to our customers. The other frontier that is being explored now is Arctic exploration. It is estimated that the Arctic region could have up to 300% to 500% of US oil and gas reserves. So we are now approaching an age where there will be enough oil and energy. Just need to figure out a way of extracting it. So just checking, you can still hear me?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. I'll just check from time to time. Right. So, what I've shown you is the challenges and the technology required for conventional oil and gas, and that has been the case for several years, right? I now want to talk about technology as a disruptor for the oil industry, right? And this is a very interesting story, and I think if you have some time after this presentation, those of you who don't know about the story should actually go to the internet and actually read it. It's a remarkable story of how some individuals have challenged notions, textbooks, an established understanding of geology, of reservoirs, of an industry. And they have literally changed the industry, and as a result, have literally changed the geopolitics of the world. Now, on the left side, what you see here is an article from the Time magazine in 2006 or 2007, right? Where they say that we are approaching an era of peak oil. And what they're saying is that we are now approaching an age where we will not be able to increase the production of oil from existing reservoirs. And there's also talk about a doomsday scenario where they're literally saying that, we will have to start switching from oil because there will not be enough oil and it will be controlled by a few countries. And we will be at the mercy of the Middle East, right? Well, they did not know about this guy on the right. His name is George Mitchell. And I'm sure George Mitchell never read this article because, he went on to prove them wrong. So George Mitchell had a conventional oil and gas reservoir. And I'll give you a little bit of background about this. If you read a textbook in say 2003 or 2004 on reservoir, on oil and gas and geological reservoirs, right? They say that most oil and gas reservoirs are either sand or carbonates, and maybe siltstone or certain special types of stones that are present that could contain oil, right? And many textbooks will say that shale and clay formations are not good reservoirs. Now, just a background, oil and gas is actually produced in these shales, right? Shales are organic rock, which actually accumulates all of this organic stuff. And then oil and gas with temperature and pressure is produced. And oil normally migrates to what is known as more porous rock with high permeability. And that's where we've conventionally extracted all our oil. Now, what George Mitchell did is that everybody knew that there was a lot of oil in shale. Everybody knew that. We just did not know, and we had not figured out how we are going to extract it. And this man actually did. I mean, there had been technologies out there which were used to kind of extract a little bit of oil from what is known as tight rock or rock with low permeability. And George Mitchell did just that. He was very persistent. He failed several times, but then he continued on this quest for trying to extract more oil from the same well. And what he did is that he actually detonated some explosives, punched some holes into this formation, and then he pumped a lot of water, sand, and some chemicals into this formation. And what that did is that because of the pressure, the hydraulic pressure, it cracked the rocks. And what that does is, these rocks are like highways, right? A network of highways with very small pores. Typically, shales will have permeability down to millidarcies or nanodarcies, which I'm sure chemical engineers would appreciate. But what they do is using this high pressure, they create cracks within those rocks. Now those cracks appear as superhighways for the traffic, which is oil and gas molecules. So this fracturing this rock creates new pathways, and that allows for the oil and gas to come out. And so the word fracking was coined, and in fact, a lot of people refer to it as hydrofracking. And that has completely revolutionized the industry. As a result, if you see the US oil and gas production from shales, which was minuscule before 2010, before George Mitchell did this, it has exploded to almost $7 million. And today, the United States is the largest producer of oil in the world, beating Saudi Arabia and Russia. Not only is the US the largest producer, from a net importer, as you saw in a couple of slides back, they have become a net exporter. Now that's the power of innovation, unconventional thinking, and that's what the industry will look from young people like you. So when I'm talking to you, I would be interested in knowing, what your ideas are, what you believe, So don't be afraid to question the textbooks. Don't be afraid to question conventional wisdom. And I'll give you a couple of more examples here, where I believe that the answers for the future in this energy transition is going to come from young people like you. And this is, if you're looking for a role model out there, I think this is one guy for you. I'll give you a couple of other role models as well. So that being said, today we are sitting on a massive supply, in fact, an oversupply of oil. Today, because of the shale gas revolution, there is 1 billion barrels of oil which has been produced, but it is sitting in tankers on the sea, and we are not able to collect it because today people are talking about peak oil demand. So from peak oil supply, we are not talking about peak oil demand, and that's how important this single innovation is. It has also changed the geopolitics of the world. Today, the United States is a far more assertive country on the international stage because they're not dependent on the oil-producing nations such as OPEC. In fact, today, in the energy market, the United States call the shots. And as a result, they've become diplomatically much stronger. They've been able to do things that they probably were constrained to do prior to being energy self-sufficient. Right. So enough about technology, disruption, conventional ways. So what we have learned now is that there is an adequate supply of oil and gas around the world. And I've not even started talking about gas hydrates, which could eclipse all the oil and gas reserves if we could find a more efficient way of getting to those gas hydrates, right? What I want to talk about now is that, yes, we have enough oil, right? But we also have Greta Thunberg. We have a whole host of studies which is indicating that indiscriminate use of fossil fuels and pumping carbon dioxide and methane into the air is causing almost irreparable damage to our environment, to the world as we know it, and to the vast diversity of species, flora and fauna in this world, right? But I think we all heard about it. So there is an increased consciousness. You heard of the Paris Climate Accord, that we actually need to reduce our carbon emissions. And today, I think more than ever, there is a social consciousness among all countries around the world and a commitment to reduce the overall carbon dioxide emissions. Now, how does that affect us? I mean, yes, there'll be some people displaced. There'll be people, especially in the low-lying areas, will get affected. This is just an economic study of where the climate change will hit us very badly. I mean, we are talking about almost an 11% change in GDP by 2050 if we don't do something about climate change. I mean, uncharacteristic floods, tornadoes, cyclones, flash floods, rise of sea levels can have such a devastating impact, not just on the ecology, but on the economic development of several poor nations. So it is very imperative for us, and I think all countries internationally have signed up to actually reduce the carbon emissions to a level that reduces that impact on the environment, right? Now this is where I think we talk about transition. We have to transition to a cleaner fuel. We have to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. And a lot of times you will talk about the options that are available to us. Solar is a really important and a very fast-growing option. Yes, it's renewable and practically free once you actually install the capex. You got wind, and several companies, especially in the North Sea, have actually converted their oil and gas platforms into windmills, right? They've installed windmills on their platforms. One of the largest windmill farms offshore is been installed by a company called Equinor, taking the same technology that they use for deep water and offshore development and converted that into wind farms. Am I still audible?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes. So you are audible, Neeraj.
Great. Now, on the left side, you see the different scenarios that we could be faced with if we don't do something about it, or if we take some proactive actions about reducing our carbon footprint. So one is business as usual. We don't do anything about it. We grow our fossil fuel dependence, and we have a carbon dioxide emission. It will eventually decline, but it will continue for the next 15 to 20 years, and it could have fairly catastrophic consequences at the rate at which we are, pumping carbon dioxide into the air. The second is that net zero, which means that whatever we do not increase carbon dioxide. We don't emit. So if net zero means we do enough to actually pump back enough carbon dioxide back into the Earth's surface, or get it out of the atmosphere, as much as we use fossil fuels to produce it. And the third is rapid, where we take a slightly more constrained and a practical view of replacing some of the dirty fuels and replacing it with clean ones. So now, Baker Hughes being an energy technology company, we have to change with the times. So there are a couple of things that we are now thinking about, and we have a slightly alternative view of what we think is clean energy. The first thing that we are really betting big on, and we believe is a very, very practical solution which balances the need for economic growth with environmental friendliness, is methane. Now you'd say methane is a hydrocarbon, but per kilojoule of energy produced by for each kilojoule of energy produced by methane, the amount of carbon dioxide that we actually pump into the air is about half of what we would do with coal. And this is discounting all the particulate and dust that we actually pump into the air, which causes all the PM5 air pollution that we get from a power plant. So I believe that in the short term, especially for countries which are energy deficient and they need to bring this energy to the market, to the poor people, I think methane production, utilization, transportation and infrastructure, and converting automobiles to methane would be a far more practical option than to have, say, Tesla take over the world of automobiles. It's already happened in Delhi. I think it's very simple to actually convert automobiles into CNG. And right now, Indian government has taken this very seriously, and actually along the Golden Quadrilateral, there is a plan by the Petroleum Ministry to install 10,000 CNG stations. And the good part about methane is that it is actually available very cheaply, and there's abundant supply of LNG in the market right now, because there are plenty of gas reservoirs, including from the US, available to substitute coal. It is also a cleaner fuel than diesel, and it would save, even if we reduced our dependence on oil by 10% and replace it with methane, you would start saving about $10 billion a year in foreign exchange. So we believe that methane is, in our opinion, a green fuel, especially compared to the options of coal and thermal power plants that we're talking about today. The second one is actually hydrogen. Hydrogen is the cleanest fuel that's possible, right? Because when you burn it, you only get water. And for a long time, people have been talking about it. And I've got a slide on hydrogen, and I'll talk a little bit about it more. And the third one is actually pumping this carbon dioxide back into the formation, either taking it out from flue gases or from the air and pumping it back. Now, you would actually question, why would we do it? Would we be as altruistic to actually pump this carbon dioxide? But it turns out that pumping back carbon dioxide has economic benefits for oil producing companies, as we are discovering now, and we'll talk a little bit about it. Right. So let's talk about hydrogen, right? So the reason I'm talking about is because this is a slightly alternative view of thinking about, we can't electrify everything, and even if you electrify everything, that electricity has to have a primary source. A lot of times the electricity that you have in your Teslas and your electric cars comes from thermal power plants, which are more polluting than, say, methane, right? So this is a space, I think, which brings a lot of technologies right to the doorstep of engineers, including chemical engineers. Hydrogen is a very clean fuel. There are abundant sources of hydrogen. So hydrogen can be produced, which is green hydrogen, which is produced from renewable sources of energy. It can be a very good source of energy storage, right? If you see the giga plants that a lot of companies are making for storage of energy, which is produced in off cycles, hydrogen can be an alternative to lithium mining and massive amounts of dependence on lithium, and I'll tell you in a moment why that is. And it can be very easily integrated into the supply chain, because you just have to pipe the hydrogen just like you pipe natural gas. At Baker Hughes, we've already taken our first step and we've developed our first hydrogen gas turbine, which can take a flexible fuel, either CNG or hydrogen. And we anticipate that Europe is going to start switching to hydrogen very soon, because they have a lot of off-cycle power generation that can be used to electrolyze water into hydrogen and pump it through the pipelines. Am I still audible?
Yes, you are.
Hello?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, the other danger, and actually, the other important aspect, which is geopolitical aspect of battery-driven cars, is that we would be heavily dependent on lithium batteries, and there are no other. I mean, there's, of course, people are talking about electrolytic batteries right now. There's some experimentation going on, but right now there is no alternative to lithium batteries. And the problem with that is that with only 2% of cars right now, even in the United States, going electric, we have a long way to go, and that will require a lot of lithium. And at present, lithium is not a renewable resource. Batteries, they degrade, and it's very expensive to extract lithium back out of the old batteries. So we are going to create another environmental issue of actually mining lithium in fairly environmentally sensitive areas. And there's a shortage of supply in lithium, and there could be a shortage of supply in lithium, which is primarily controlled by Chinese companies around the world. So you could replace one expensive fossil fuel with another commodity, which is also mined just like fossil fuel, and it is not renewable. So I think what we need to look at is alternative sources of energy, or a mix of energy in the basket that we are doing. Airbus is already looking at developing a hydrogen jet. Several companies are now looking at producing hydrogen from coal, using basic chemical reactions. Hydrogen fuel cars, or Indian Oil has already created a hydrogen fuel bus using hydrogen fuel cells. And very recently, there are companies in Canada which are now using underground fields as confined reactors, in which they actually pump oxygen and water, and they burn oil downhole to produce hydrogen and actually sequester the carbon dioxide right there. So this is again very much the domain of chemical engineers, because it requires development of special materials, catalysts, ceramics, and membranes, which are selective for hydrogen and not for carbon dioxide. And of course, reactor kinetics in complex underground systems is another area that could be a focus, because now every hydrocarbon molecule, you could potentially extract the hydrogen and keep the carbon dioxide right there, right? So you could actually be carbon negative and still produce a clean fuel. So we believe, we are very bullish about hydrogen, and I think this is a space that as a chemical engineer, if you're looking to the future, you should keep track of, and there may be a lot of opportunities that come in the future. Lastly, I want to talk about carbon sequestration, right? And I think this is gaining momentum, and we as a company have already invested, and we have just bought a company that is participating in this. So if you see, we are now transiting from a company that used to help oil and gas companies produce fossil fuels. We continue to do that, but we're also transiting to help our customers get cleaner, get more carbon negative, and actually clean up the environment, right? So the reason carbon dioxide injection has now become economical is because if you inject carbon dioxide into oil and gas reservoirs, you actually modify the PVT properties of the oil. Once that carbon dioxide mixes with that oil, it makes that oil swell. It increases the pressure. It reduces the viscosity and makes it flow better. So the relative permeability of oil vis-a-vis water or anything else that is out there improves, and it improves the overall recovery of oil and gas. So it has found an application in actually increasing hydrocarbons while at the same time reducing your carbon footprint. So we are living in very, very exciting times. And again, reservoir modeling, chemical injection, interaction of fluids, transforming of molecules is something that is right at the doorstep of chemical engineers. Now, $800 million has just been committed by one of the largest oil companies to three large oil companies in the North Sea, Shell, Total, and Equinor, and they'll be collecting carbon dioxide from industrial emitters, and they'll be pumping it back into the North Sea. One of the key technologies that is involved in this process is actually the separation of carbon dioxide from the rest of the flue gases, right? Because you don't want to pump oxygen back into the well, all kinds of complications would occur. And so there is a Norwegian company that we've recently taken over that has innovated a centrifugal cryogenic separation mechanism for separating carbon dioxide that reduces the cost of carbon dioxide separation, which is one of the major costs of carbon dioxide sequestration. We think that this is going to be the future. It's going to be an important part of our customer portfolio going forward, and actually we have invested well into that. Now, if you're really looking for a role model and you're looking for the future, you have a role model right in your peer group, which is a company that has been incubated in IIT Kharagpur in the chemical engineering department. And they've also come up with a new and a more efficient way of separation of carbon dioxide from flue gas mixtures and from air using a slightly different technology, fluid bed reactors, right? And they've actually received $16 million funding. So this was me giving you a little perspective of what energy is, what the oil and gas industry is. And I hope I have emphasized that, of course, I'm partial to chemical engineers because I graduated as a chemical engineer. But there is a lot of multidisciplinary interaction, multidisciplinary future in oil and gas, and a lot of that could be driven by this domain of yours. And lastly, I'm not a guy who likes to preach a lot, but I have an emotional connection to my alumni, and I just like to stress the thing. Look, I mean, if you are looking forward, when you're stepping out, you have certain uncertainties. You don't know what you're going to do. So this is my advice to you. I've spent the past 25 years doing something that I like. I get out of bed and I think about technology, I think about my customers, and I try to find solutions for them, right? So my advice to you is find something that is interesting, find a passion. It could be multiple passions, and just pursue them. Just pursue them, right? And just go after them. Now these passions could change over your lifetime, but you've got to find something that excites you and just go after it and don't think too much about it. Keep your horizons open. Don't silo yourself into a certain small discipline. Be open to different disciplines, because as you see, an oil and gas guy is not just a chemical engineer. He's not just a mechanical. It brings a team of mechanical, chemical, material science geologists and geophysicists together to make this happen. So you will want to work in multidisciplinary teams, and you have to be open to ideas from other disciplines to be able to succeed. Never too late to learn. You will have to continue to learn. You will have to adopt digital technologies. You have to understand AI and ML. Now, there are people talking about using artificial intelligence to solve Navier-Stokes, right? I mean, there has been a paper that's been published. So problems that could not be solved in the past will get solved with the tools that you have today. You just have to go and find what problems are there and what complexities are there that the industry needs to be solved. I think that's what you should be focused on. And lastly, take a slightly longer term view of your career and don't be afraid of thinking big. So with that, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak here, and I'm open for questions. Thank you, Professor Mahajani.
Yeah, thank you, Neeraj. Thank you. It was really quite informative and insightful. Like, we thoroughly enjoyed your talk. Are you able to hear me, everyone? Hello?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Right. So you talked about many things, like such a complex field. You explained it in such a simple language. I'm sure all the attendees would have got benefited and enjoyed as much as I did. And Yeah, just to summarize quickly what you said, like you talked about the latest technology. Somebody can actually drill a well sitting here from 9,000 miles away and see oil being produced and all. It's quite exciting to know about that. Like, and secondly, you talked about how technology can be disruptive, giving an example of fracking, and somehow it has changed the geopolitics altogether. Okay, making US again dominating in the oil sector. Like, then, if I'm correct, you touched upon the alternative fuels. Okay, because of the environment issues that we are facing, and you gave a very different perspective, and which is quite interesting, saying that I think we should, instead of just moving to kind of wind, solar, and all, we should think about methane and hydrogen as well. Okay, and which are quite promising, and we have much less emissions, and there are many ways you can explore this energy. And lastly, but very important, is about CO2 sequestration that everyone is talking about, and that will make even the oil carbon neutral. Okay, if you can get CO2 back to reservoirs, that will be nothing like that. So, and of course, the last slide was quite important for students. Your overall perspective about, like, or based on your experience, like what they should do as far as their future is concerned. Okay, that they should think big, at the same time pursue their ideas. Okay, thanks a lot. And we have some questions here. Yeah, please. Yeah. Sorry, you're saying something? Hello?
I think we lost you there.
Oh, is it? Uh, can you hear me now?
Sir, it was okay, I think. So you can
Yeah,
continue.
I think, yeah, okay. I think Neeraj has some problem hearing me. Neeraj, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you now.
Okay, great. All right, so we have some questions, Neeraj, for you. Of course, whatever questions were given to you by the students earlier, I think most of them you addressed. Okay, but I think we can elaborate on some of them in this next 10-15 minutes. There is, so you mentioned about gas hydrates. Okay, now can you just briefly tell us what these gas hydrates are? Because it seems they hold a lot of promise, and there is some future for that as well. Okay.
Yeah. So, as you go down, as you descend from the shallow water shelf to the deep sea, right? There is a
Yeah.
transition zone, right? And in that transition zone, in fact, even in the deep water, the deep sea, in some areas, right, there is a significant amount of, this is where ice, water freezes, right? There is a section where
Right.
just below the ground, the temperature is below freezing point, and there is a lot of methane trapped in these hydrates,
I see. Okay.
and they're talking about maybe 100 trillion cubic feet of gas
I see. Okay.
trapped in these reservoirs. Unfortunately, we do not know an efficient mechanism to actually extract this hydrate, because it's trapped in ice. So how do you access a large area of ice, melt that hydrate, and extract it and go in? So there's a lot of research going on. NGRI is part of that research team, and if there is a chemical solution, a thermodynamic solution to this, I mean, there are a lot of research opportunities for there, and Japan, India, United States, they all have a lot of interest in actually doing some of that research. A lot of that information may be available with NGRI and with ONGC, and
Yeah.
it could be a potential area of people to explore and put in something of interest for the future.
Right. Thank you. So India has large gas hydrate reserves, is it?
That's right. India, Arctic, US, Japan, they all
Okay.
have large gas reserves.
Great. So there is one question. Again, you mentioned about shale oil of US. Can you please elaborate that? Okay, because that seems to be something that has changed the entire geopolitics of late. So can you just elaborate what is shale oil and how is it different from the crude oil that we get from oil wells and all?
So look, I mean, shale oil is just oil that comes from shale instead of sand.
Okay.
Now, traditionally, we did not believe that this was extractable because the permeability of the rock is extremely low. I mean, we are talking about 100 nanodarcy or a millidarcy of permeability. Now, how do you get that oil to flow through that permeability? So you have to actually crack that rock and create super highways within that shale oil in order to extract that. So simply, we are creating high-level secondary porosity within those shale structures, and actually allowing that oil to go through those structures.
Right. So how is it different from crude oil in terms of composition and all? Like it is heavier than crude oil, or how is it?
No, it's the same. I mean, it's the same oil. It's just that the oil that is remaining in the shale is.
Oh, okay. So it's like you're taking out the residual.
Well, actually, the shale oil reserves in many reservoirs is actually more than the primary reserves in the sand so there are massive amounts of shale oil reserves, which have never been exploited. They've never been able to extract those.
Right. So you showed that graph where actually you're showing that towards 2050, I think we'll, of course, fossil fuels will still have some place, but the alternative fuels will probably be used more compared to the fossil fuels, right? Now, how will this transition happen? Because somebody is saying here, I think Srivatsa, okay, is saying that unless we have the fossil fuels going down completely, how can the other things like say biodiesel or compressed natural gas and all, how can you convince people to use them rather you think first the oil will go down and we'll have zero oil reserves and then only the alternate fuels will pick up, right?
No. I think we will continue to have a very mixed basket of fuel. It is very practical. It is very strategic, and it's geopolitically prudent to have a mixed energy basket rather than be dependent on one particular source of energy. Because if that source of energy is disrupted, then your entire economy gets disrupted. So at least strategically, at least for India, we're taking a very pragmatic view of finding the best, cleanest, balancing the economics with the commitments we have made towards creating a cleaner environment. So I think we have to balance and mix our energy basket to make it more diverse.
Yeah, I think that answers other question also, because there was a question saying that among the alternate fuels or renewable fuels, which one will probably take the front seat and which one will be on the back seat, or like what is your prediction? Like, because we're talking about say wind, solar, nuclear, biofuels and so on. How do you rate them rather? Like,
see, I think it is very regionally dependent.
Yeah.
And it also depends on, see, again, oil and gas is not a constant industry. As you can see, one technology has the power to disrupt the whole world, right? So, it is very regionally dependent. Now, if we can figure out a way of finding more oil within the country, probably we'll produce that first. But right now, we're depending on a lot of oil imports, right? Fortunately for us, the abundance of gas resources offers us a very, very good and at a practical way of reducing our emissions, at the same time providing energy to our masses by piping the LNG at low prices into the infrastructure, which will help us clean up our environment, reduce our dependence on dirty fuels like diesel, and especially replace coal thermal plants with gas-based thermal plants, right? So for the time being, I think it will coexist with the growth of solar energy, and it will maybe even engineer future opportunities for generating hydrogen.
Oh, okay. Great. Right. So now from India, some Indian context rather, like you said that 80% of our oil we are importing, and so how do you see India in next say couple of decades in terms of the entire oil scenario or rather the energy scenario? Like because much of your talk was actually looking at a global picture, and of course India is part of that. But if you just look at India exclusively, how do you see the energy future as far as India is concerned?
See, the energy future of exploration, as I said, is determined not just by, but not just determined by technology. It takes a lot of capital investment. It takes a very favorable regulatory mechanism, which the government is now putting in place with the open access, open acreage, and less bureaucratic framework for exploration. 60% of our basins still need to be explored properly. We have 27 river basins. And only about 9 of them have been properly explored, right? So there is a huge potential for exploring these basins. But we also need to provide a framework where oil companies would be willing to invest. And if you're coming to invest $1 billion, then we have to have the regulatory framework that allows us to invest that money. It has to be favorable to business investments. And I think well, the current government is actually working on that, and there is a lot of momentum towards it. So I think oil is discovered by optimism along with capital investment and technology. So if you're in the industry, it's very important to stay optimistic and believe and be convinced that there is oil out there and you will find it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have a last question, last technical question before I move to the career-oriented questions. Like students always have these questions. So before that, you mentioned something about electrical vehicles and problems with lithium storage and availability and all. Because like somehow, electric vehicles are being looked upon as a threat to oil and gas sector. Now, can you just put your comments on that, like briefly?
The question is electrical vehicles?
Yeah, how will it affect the oil and gas sector? So, advent of electric vehicles, yeah.
Look, advent of electrical vehicles does reduce the demand for fuel. So it reduces the demand for fuel, diesel, and petrol.
Yes.
Okay. But it does not reduce the demand for energy.
Right. Okay.
So the source of electricity still has to come from a primary source.
Okay.
Right? Now that source could be electrical, that source could be solar, it could be gas, it could be coal.
Coal, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But what will happen is that it will have a fundamental change in the refining business, because as you reduce your requirement and demand for fuel, a lot of refineries, and you may be aware of it better than me, is that a lot of refineries are moving from oil to chemicals business rather than oil to fuel business.
Yeah.
So you will have opportunity for more diversified refining, more diversified reactors, more flexible reactors to produce more complex chemicals out of oil rather than just producing fuel.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree with you. Now let's move to some more important questions for students who are attending this talk. So the question is like the career prospects. Of course, you said that there are many chemical engineering concepts involved in almost every aspect of oil production. But if you see, somehow the chemical engineering curriculum doesn't include the upstream part of it. I don't know. You see that as a problem, and somehow this entire field, students think that that is not their cup of tea or something like that. So can you just elaborate on the career prospects as far as chemical engineering is concerned, like in this sector?
So I think what is happening is, like, for example, a lot of IIT Bombay has a branch in geophysics and geology, right? I mean, they have a separate branch for that.
Earth sciences, yes.
They do not have a curriculum for petroleum engineering.
Right.
Although we still recruit from all institutes, including IIT Mumbai. I mean, we are very well represented in the industry. But a lot of the other colleges, they actually specialize in petroleum technology. Like you have UPES in Dehradun, you have Deen Dayal University in Gujarat, you have ISM Dhanbad, which is now an IIT, of course. So,
Right.
There is a different kind of focus towards the upstream oil and gas, petroleum engineering segment. So it's possible that you could, if you're interested, maybe having a couple of electives in the last 1.5 years of your graduation, and including petroleum engineering as part of it,
Right.
and putting some of that application of those concepts into petroleum engineering, flow through porous media, flow through pipes, production technologies, nodal analysis, maybe simulation. You could do reservoir simulation projects, and then that would probably get you access to some of this stuff. Also, there's a lot of work going on in companies like Dow Chemicals and other companies which for oil and gas based chemicals, right, especially for enhanced oil recovery projects. So those could be areas of focus within the chemical engineering department, which would align them to to the oil and gas space.
Yeah. So there is another question. Sorry, I think we are kind of slightly running behind schedule, but I think it's important. I hope you have some 5-10 minutes.
No problem. Today's a Sunday.
Okay. Yeah. So nowadays, these internships are very important for students. In our times, internships or work practice was not so crucial. So in these days, even if it is optional, students somehow may ensure that they do internships and all, which actually increases their they strengthens their CV. At the same time, they get to explore certain areas in which they can find some interest. Okay, so from that viewpoint, somehow oil and gas sector internships are very rare. That is what students are saying. Because normally the internships are happening through our training and placement office, where the companies come and select students, like what they do for placement as well. So why is that, rather? How do we find internships in oil and gas sector? That's a simple question, brother.
I think this is a cyclic industry right now, and one of the things that hurts this industry is low oil prices.
Okay, I see. Mm-hmm.
And we've had a sustained period of low oil prices over the past 5 to 6 years. As a result, it has affected our ability to recruit more people. We have to do more with less. But I am positive that I've seen many of these cycles over my 25 years, that the cycle will see an upswing. And you will find that we will come back. So look, I mean, I've been recruiting in IIT Bombay since 2002. And many of my managers are from chemical engineering or other departments, from the institute. The heads of all three big service companies such as Halliburton and, of course, Baker Hughes, and of course the CEO of 𝐶EN Energy, they're all from this institute, right? So I think the opportunities will come. I think we are just going through a difficult phase of a downturn in the oil industry, simply because we are just producing so much oil and the prices have gone down. So I think we will see an uptick very soon, and I think we just need to be patient and take a longer term view of the whole industry.
I see. So there's a bright future ahead. Yes, right. So I think more or less we have done. So there's one question where they're talking about private versus public. I don't know whether you have any comments on this, private oil companies versus public.
Private versus public.
Hello.
Okay. I can't see the question. What is the exact question? What's the exact question is
private companies and public sector units. How do you see a difference in terms of work culture and all?
No, I think it's always the same, right? I mean, public sector companies offer you a slightly more stable, risk-free employment for a long time. It allows you, it gives you a sense of working for the country, for public enterprise which serves the nation. I mean, there's a lot of patriotic feeling involved there. It also offers you a lot of opportunities to learn and flexibility to, do certain things which may not be always, aligned with a profit-driven private sector company. But a private sector company can offer you a more international experience. It can offer you, a more competitive landscape, and it can offer you a faster career growth, right? I mean, but it also comes with its own risks, right? Because if there's a downturn, more likely a private sector company would be more likely to lay people off rather than a public sector enterprise.
Yeah.
So it's a stability versus risk.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think with that, I think we come to the end of all the questions. I hope I have covered all the questions that are there in the chat box and that came to me before we started this session. But in all, it was really, as I said in the beginning itself, it was really a very nice, informative session. And I think many students who are attending this particular session would have got motivated and probably look at this sector as a possible career prospect. Okay. So with that, I thank you again. I thank the AZeotropy team as well for asking me to kind of be part of this particular session. I also enjoyed it very much. So with that, I will hand it over to 𝐍𝐞𝐞𝐫 to say a few words before we end this session. Yeah, 𝐍𝐞𝐞𝐫 is overall coordinator of AZeotropy. 𝐍𝐶𝐞𝐞𝐫, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So good evening, everyone. I am 𝐍𝐶𝐞𝐞𝐫 and I am the overall coordinator for AZeotropy 2021. So I would like to begin by thanking Mr. Neeraj for taking out his valuable time and giving us great insights into the oil and gas industry. It was indeed a very insightful talk and enlightening talk for all of us, and we got to learn a lot. Secondly, I would like to thank Professor Sanjay Mahajani for accepting to be the moderator for this session and making this a huge success for all of us. Thank you very much. And last but not the least, thank you to all the audience who have come here. And I hope this session was useful for all of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.